Ohio State can't find any defensive ends outside the state, and for as well as they develop defensive ends, why can't they find the best defensive ends in the country and bring them in?
I mean, what Ohio school did Chase Young come from?
Oh, but since then they've only landed 2 out-of-staters: Tyler Friday at 18 and Jacoby Cowan in 20. I saw the question was popped up. I was doing a little research there. It's not from lack of trying. They had Tunisi out of AA committed for a while, and he fell off the board or whatnot. But when you go in-state and you recruit, Jack Sawyer, Ty Hamilton, Henry Young, Noah Potter, Tyreek Smith, and then Alex Williams was in there too, but he was only there briefly before transferring out. I mean, guys are going to look at the depth chart or whatever, and I think that maybe there's some guys that don't necessarily like the idea of rolling in 6, 7, 8 defensive ends. I mean, I don't think that there's many defensive ends out there that aren't excited for the opportunity to learn under Larry Johnson, everything he's been able to accomplish, everybody he's been able to develop. But not everybody's a great fit. And on the fit conversation, that also goes both ways. Ohio State's not necessarily going to go after every kid. We sit there and we go star hunting and we see, all right, this defensive end is, hypothetically, I don't have a Rivals 250 in front of me. He's number 7 and he's number 13. Why aren't we going after him? It's something that has to work both ways. I mean, so Ohio State isn't going to just sit there and look at star ratings and say, these are the kids we're going to go after. You have, everybody's got to check off boxes, and it doesn't always happen.
You mentioned Tunmise Adelie decommitting. Go back to Brenton Cox, Terrell Hall, where you get guys from out of state, and sometimes the lure of, I think Brenton Cox was from Georgia, correct, and stayed home in Georgia. Terrell Hall, was he Maryland or
out of the DMV area?
And he ends up at Alabama. So it's like you can secure commitments, but then you also have to keep them, and that's also difficult when there's the lure of other schools. I think they've done as well as you can, but right now they're in the midst of the JT Tuimoloau thing, and he if they land him, then that's the top 2 defensive ends. One's in state, one's out of state. I just don't think you can. I don't know why the criticism for lack of out of state defensive end recruiting when they are getting them, but you can't just. It's not shopping,
I worry more about male pattern baldness than I do about Ohio State's defensive end recruiting, to be honest. They'll be fine.
Yeah, they're going to do fine there. And obviously, if they were to land Tuimoloau, he would be on the field for them this fall. So it could create an instant impact. Although, we've seen with Joey Bosa, it took him about a half a first year, although he wasn't entirely healthy, I don't think, coming in his first year, but it took him about a half a year to become Joey Bosa. So, kind of keep a thought on that. I saw David's question about Paul Warfield, and I can just throw in my 2 cents on that. Played for Woody and was mostly a running back, I think, at Ohio State. May have been on their quasi-national championship team in 1961. And as a young Browns fan growing up in the late 70s and around 1980, I got to see his last year or two with the Cleveland Browns. He was there with Reggie Rucker and Dave Logan and Ozzie Newsome, I think, there at the very end. And Brian Sipe is the quarterback, and obviously had a great NFL career with the Miami Dolphins as well. Somebody can correct me. I presume he was on their undefeated Super Bowl championship team down there. Long NFL career as a wide receiver. So for Woody, he caught passes. Certainly they didn't throw it a whole heck of a lot, but he was a great weapon, I think, for Ohio State. And then what I think a lot of people remember him for is after his playing career was over in the early 1980s, he settled into a job, a part-time job as a commentator. I think he did some games on NBC, but also was famous, locally famous for the WOSU replays. I think it was he and Paul Kramer, or I don't know, it wasn't Paul Kramer. Jack Kramer may have been the play-by-play guy, and Paul Warfield was the analyst. Paul Warfield was the analyst on the Ohio State football replays on Channel 34, WOSU, an NFL Hall of Famer. And I can hear his voice in my head right now, watching the games on, Saturday night at 11 o'clock or Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And because that was the only way you could watch them back then, because a lot of the games weren't on live TV. But great legacy, great Buckeye, and really one of the great names in the history of the sport, Paul Warfield.
That's right. And folks, if you're going to look up his stats online, don't expect to be amazed. Those 2 Super Bowl championship teams, if my computer's working, Bob Greasy went 8 for 11 and 6 for 7. They didn't throw the ball a whole lot in those games. He would get his 1 or 2 big pass receptions for the day, and then he was pretty much decoy the rest of the time.
Jim Kick and Larry Zonka and
right.
Mercury Hayes, and I don't know. They had some
Morris.
guys.
You got Michigan on the brain, Steve.
Mercury Hayes. What was it? What was his name?
Mercury Morris.
Mercury Morris. Okay, not Mercury Hayes.
Freddie Mercury.
That's Mercury Hayes.